I want to present to you how the U.S. court system works, and the reason why I want to present that are a couple. So first, you're going to need a nice overview of how the U.S. court system works to be able to properly analyze the Fitbit class action suit. The second reason is, and you're beginning to probably get a flavor of this already within Management 559, Health Sector Management, is that the health sector is full of regulations and laws that you need to be aware of. The purpose is not for you to be an attorney, nor is it to be a legislator, but you have to have some fluency and competency about how the court system works from a U.S. perspective. There are two types of laws. So one are statutes. So statutes are written laws. The other major type of law beyond a statute is judge-made law. So every day, judges are making decisions and they issue judicial opinions, and those opinions are in writing. So it's critically important that when you're looking at laws that are applicable to health organizations, you have statutes, which are passed by legislatures, which we'll get to in a moment, and you also have judge-made law with regard to opinions. Those are the two types. So how does a bill become a law of the land or a statute? So let's kind of go back to maybe fourth grade civics. So at both the federal level and the state level, you have two houses. So you typically, in the U.S., at the federal level, you have the United States Senate. So there are two senators per state. And then you also have the House of Representatives. And then House of Representatives are determined by the population within each one of the congressional districts, which is determined at the level of the state. So what has to happen is that the legislation or the bill moves through one house, then the other house. It must be passed by both houses. So the Senate as well as Congress. And then if it's passed by both houses, then it's signed off by the president. And if the president signs off on it, then hence it becomes the law of the land or a statute. So that's how a bill becomes law. Let's take a closer look at the U.S. court system. So as we look at this particular graph, what you will note is, let's go the state route first. So certain cases or claims are proper to go in the state side or the federal side. So that's the decision point. So typically an attorney will make the decision. What's the best venue? Should we do a state track or should we do a federal track? So let's begin with the state track. So then it goes up to the state trial court. So at the trial court, they're the deciders of fact. And then if the decision is not challenged, then what happens is that decision rests at the level of the trial court. If the decision is challenged by the plaintiff or the defendant, typically the losing party, then it goes to the state appeals court. And at the level of the appeals court, they're not deciding upon fact, but they're deciding upon errors in the law. And let's imagine that once it goes to the appeals court, then there's no controversy there, then that particular opinion is held. If there is a matter of discretion, or if there is a matter of dispute at the level of the appeals court, then it can go to the state Supreme Court. So each one of the states has its own Supreme Court. Same thing happens there. If both parties are satisfied with the decision at the state Supreme Court, it remains there. If not, then it can go up to the United States Supreme Court, which is in Washington, D.C. Not all cases actually are heard at the United States Supreme Court, but that's the process. So now let's go to the federal side. So the federal side, you have United States District Court. And again, they're kind of the triers of fact. And then you have a United States Court of Appeals. And then finally, you get up to the United States Supreme Court. So for the purposes of health sector management, these are the two most important court systems that you need to be mindful of. So let's look at the Fitbit class action lawsuit, which is one of the assignments for this course. So one of the particular statutes or laws that you must consider is the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And this particular statute was established a number of decades ago and has some relevance for this class action suit. Let's take a closer examination of exactly where this particular case was filed. So if you note, United States District Court, that tells us it's a federal claim of action, the Northern District of California, in the San Francisco Division. So that tells you that it's a federal case and where it's going to be heard. Then if you note, it says class action. So class action complaint, demand for a jury trial. Let's dissect that. So when you have a case at the federal or state level, a judge can hear the case without a jury, or a jury can hear the case and the judge is there. So in this particular instance, there's a demand for a jury trial. So now let's go to who the plaintiffs are. Those are the individuals that are bringing forth the cause of action, and who's the defendant. So those that are defending against the cause of action. So the plaintiffs, I'm not going to read all their names, but it begins with McClellan and it goes through, hence it's a class action suit. The defendant is the company, Fitbit. So the basis of the particular claim is revolving around the Food and Drug Administration classification system. So the FDA classification system says that the FDA has regulatory purview to approve and disapprove medical devices based upon these categories. So class 1, and the most important piece I'm going to look at is risk. If it's low-level risk, class 1. So you don't need to fill out a lot of paperwork, minimal cost. Class 2 is moderate or medium risk. So there you do have to fill out some paperwork, higher cost. Class 3 is high risk. A lot more costly, a lot more paperwork, and you must do a clinical trial. So really the FDA looks at it from a risk point of view. So if you're going to have anything that's implantable or invasive, a higher risk. So if you think about a Fitbit, it fits on my wrist. Yep. So is that invasive? No, it's not invasive. Are there sensors? Yes, there's sensors looking at my pulse. There's sensors looking at, in some cases, sweat, galvanic skin response, but there's nothing that's penetrating my skin. But that does not mean that there's not a risk, which is the basis of this particular lawsuit. So from your point of view, would you consider Fitbit to be a mobile medical app or a consumer wearable? So in fact, the FDA came out with regulatory guidelines in the publication, which is shown there, 103 FDA-regulated mobile medical apps. Now, when they use the language medical, they're suggesting that at least there's a medium or high risk, hence the term medical, rather than a consumer wearable. A consumer wearable is suggesting that it's a class 1 of little risk. Now, what's at issue in the claim that you'll read is Fitbit had an advertising campaign, and what you see there is just a sample of it, and it said, "Every step counts." So if you think about that advertising campaign, is it in some way guaranteeing some type of benefit? Is it in some way suggesting that there's a certain level of risk? That's what at issue with regard to this particular lawsuit, which is why I want you to read it and address the questions that have been posted. So another thing that I want to focus on before we leave this topic is please differentiate what's legal versus what's ethical. And I'm going to read this quote because it's a powerful quote. When I first saw it, I said, yes, that's it, to really help people understand the difference between what's legal and what's ethical. So let's read this. The Holocaust was legal. Slavery was legal. Segregation was legal. If you use the state government as a metric for ethics, you'll end up disappointed. Think about that. Legal is not necessarily ethical. And throughout this course, there are certain challenges and situations that we discussed and will continue to discuss that are clearly illegal, out of compliance with regulations, out of compliance with accreditation standards, and also I would suggest too are unethical. And as a future health sector leader, it's important for you to know and appreciate the difference.